to have a child should not be a man.
The modern day feminist movement, I don't agree with it.
I'm really not a feminist, I'm an individualist.
What does National Women's Year mean to you? Nothing. Nothing at all.
Do you have hope that this is actually on a tipping point? Are we on a curve that can only go in the right direction?
I think it could go either direction, yes. I hope it will go in the right direction.
Hey, ho, ho, Trump has got to go! Hey, hey, ho, ho, Trump has got to go!
Feminism in the U.S. began in the early 20th century as the movement for women to advocate for the right to vote. As the role of women transformed from the homemaker to the working woman, the definition of feminism underwent various transformations. First-wave feminism, which primarily focused on women's suffrage for the middle-class white woman, which then transitioned to second wave, from the 60s to 80s, focusing on reproductive rights. Third-wave feminism in the 90s, and present-day fourth-wave feminism, which many argue is conducted primarily online. The question remains, what is feminism, and how can it be so polarizing? I set out on a year-long journey to answer these questions, covering my desk with academic journals and traveling across the U.S. to interview a variety of women. My research aims to provide insight into the inner workings of feminism in Generation Z females and how other generations perceive them. So, my question is, what is the future of feminism?
A lot of women do things that they aren't really suited for.
Female empowerment gone wrong?
Have we created a culture that objectifies women or empowers them?
Little Women was nominated for Best Picture. She was not nominated for Best Director. That's egregious.
We're going backward.
When I first learned the term a feminist, you were supposed to be a militant lesbian in Birkenstocks.
When I think of feminism, when I originally learned about feminism, it was kind of a dirty word. You didn't want to be called a feminist.
It can range from people when I was younger that were quite radical.
There was no such thing as a feminist. You were always a militant feminist.
I suppose I could have stayed home and baked cookies and had teas.
I believe in women's rights and the right to choose, but I'm not necessarily real vocal about it.
I'd like to consider myself a feminist. I mean, I don't think that I am entirely like the epitome of what I envision a feminist to be in terms of like barrier breaking.
The perception of feminism has certainly changed throughout the years. When asking the participants what comes to mind when they think of feminism today, all use the words empowerment, equality, or strength, showing that the word clearly brings positive connotations. However, smaller nuances in the movement are more controversial. Still, 83% of participants consider themselves a feminist.
If there was a women's march, I'd be there.
And some feel there are certain requirements.
I think the only thing is to be understanding of all women.
I think that it has to be intersectional. I think you can't be in it for yourself.
I mean, I do think that you have to have a mindset that regardless of your culture and your background, that you have every bit as much right to be here as anyone else.
I think that as long as whether you're a man or a woman, if you support the rights of women, you're a feminist.
It's just equality, which I think everyone should be for.
However, some are reluctant to use this label due to political ties and a lack of necessity.
I guess I'm not as strong opinionated of it. It doesn't bother me. I don't know, I guess I was raised in a very Republican politics type.
83% of participants felt that there is a disconnect between generations regarding the meaning and purpose of feminism.
I'm not sure that the newest generation, Generation Z, maybe expresses feminism in the same way that my generation did.
So I think there is a bit of a disconnect.
Is this disconnect truly as prominent as we believe, or is it just a perception? More recently, some argue that feminism is no longer necessary. However, 66% of participants reported a specific incident in which they felt harassed, embarrassed, or unfairly disadvantaged due to being a woman.
I went to my principal and said, I found out I'm pregnant, and I wasn't supposed to be. My husband was still in college.
And she said, oh my, you can't teach anymore. And I looked at her and I said, I have to teach, we need money. And she said, okay, I'm gonna help you. She said, I'm gonna take you out of the classroom and I'll put you back in the trailer in the back. So she moved my first grade class back there so I could teach, so the parents wouldn't see that I was pregnant.
I've heard judges make sexist jokes in chambers to male attorneys in front of me.
And I felt very, very silenced because of something so menial.
Brett Kavanaugh was in my class, and so I remember that we had the first Take Back the Night March here on this campus, and we had to think really long and hard about whether or not we were going to march past the decals, whether it was safe enough to march past the fraternity that he was a part of.
Participants were then asked to view these 4 photos and determine which they felt was the most feminist and the least feminist. 66% felt that this was the most feminist photo, meaning they likely associate feminism with activism.
I think she's just standing up for what she believes in. She's being herself. She's putting herself out there in a world that's hard to do that.
25% found this as the most feminist photo.
This photo says it's a paid partnership for Cupshe. So this is a business arrangement.
This person is in control of her body, and I think it's badass that she's making money off of that.
16% found this as the most feminist photo.
For me, she's the most of who she is. I mean, I feel like for this one feels the most self-possessed.
Meanwhile, 30% of participants identified the same photo as the least feminist.
5 years from now, is she going to be happy with this photo?
In the context that she is young, she's really kind of like exploiting herself a little bit. And just the way it's displayed, it almost looks like a lot of people really the only thing they have to judge of her is her look and her body. There's no like caption with context.
23% found this to be the least feminist photo.
Just she seems more reserved and not as comfortable in her own skin.
She would not necessarily make waves.
15% chose this photo.
Feels as though she has altered her body with an Instagram app.
And 23% chose none of them.
I think there are reasons why people post their pictures, and I don't know what those reasons are.
She could be a feminist. I don't know that clothing has to, be a part of being a feminist.
I think they all, in their own way, are feminist pictures.
As you can tell, the answers were incredibly varied, showing that there is no consensus on what a feminist should look like. Participants then viewed a video compilation of 4 areas of feminism promoted by these Generation Z influencers. First, we have conservative feminism, which is promoting the idea that women are best suited for work in the home.
I'm a housewife, and I love it. The feminine woman doesn't fit the modern narrative for feminism.
I think that a lot of people and a lot of women are fighting that natural desire to be a wife and to be a mother and to do things that they aren't really suited for.
The emergence of these feminine lifestyle bloggers raised concerns.
They were kind of characterizing having a career as a masculine trait, which isn't a thing.
I don't think there's anything wrong with staying home and being a mother. She gave me the impression, though, that was the only thing you could be.
I think that you can be a feminist whether you work outside the home or inside the home. But working inside the home, to me, is more than wiping down toilets or taking care of a dog.
There's a loss of femininity by trying to promote masculinity, and that's what feminism is. I don't agree with.
They were essentially saying, don't pursue working outside the home. You're not suited for it. That's a pretty extreme view.
Next up, we have raunch culture, which is something you're probably already familiar with. Raunch culture is a term first defined by Ariel Levy, calling it a culture which promotes overtly sexual representations of women and objectification. You may recognize raunch culture from the emergence of pole dancing for exercise, Hollywood stars like Miley Cyrus, and even the controversy surrounding the 2020 Super Bowl halftime show.
I watched it with my 11-year-old daughter, and I thought it was fantastic. I saw also a lot of the messages like on social media, like, oh my God, I wouldn't let my kid watch that. I mean, honestly, what I saw were two strong women, 40s and 50-year-old, with like tons of amazing dancers with them performing, and I thought it sounded a great message to young girls.
I think it is the idea that we will use social media and build a brand for ourselves, and we will use men to promote ourselves, but at the same time they are objectifying themselves.
Being in college, you live around it.
It's just not something I, truthfully, maybe not approve of.
Then there's intersectional feminism, which is a movement recognizing barriers to gender equality vary according to a woman's race, age, ethnicity, and religion.
I think that it has to be intersectional. I think you can't be in it for yourself.
But one participant raised concerns that this may not be as inclusive as it claims.
So to me, to suggest that someone's including them, that right there inherently says someone's in charge and handing it down.
Lastly, there's bad feminism, a term coined by Roxane Gay, which is the idea that we can love things that are sometimes in contrast with the feminist ideology, but still call ourselves feminists.
There's this constant struggle within me between the person that tries to be a good feminist and the person who was socialized by the dominant society. And as it turns out, the dominant society is not always the biggest fan of women. Basically, we're all bad feminists sometimes.
Several participants felt that they could identify with bad feminism.
I really think that we're all learning and we're all growing and we're all trying to better ourselves as a society. And so the most important thing with all of it is you can be wrong.
And some felt that all four subsets were good representations of feminism.
My initial thoughts after watching the video was that all of the various little segments of videos represent feminism, every single one of them.
And so, the one who was like, well, I choose to be a wife and a mother, and I mean, that's a form of feminism.
It's like the first video I'm watching, I'm like, you go girl, you be a housewife. Like, I love that, but it's about, I can choose to be a housewife, or I can choose to go and make all the money for my family, and I'll have a fair shot at doing that.
It does strike me that they're searching, each and every one of them in their own way, and it feels as if they want to point the finger at something else to justify what they have chosen for themselves, and that feels like a huge waste of energy.
Social media, because there's no ownership to it, they have belittled women.
Things like Me Too and Time's Up are positive benefits of social media.
You have the power to say anything that you want, and you should be able to express your opinion. But I think you have to be prepared for people to come back at you and come back at you hard.
Looking at those pictures, your social media can ruin a girl.
When you're 19, looking sexy, being pretty is really important. When you're 28 and you want to make partner, or you want to get that big account, or you want a promotion, you want to be judged on the basis of how hard you work and how smart you are.
The fact is it's spreading these stereotypes and these expectations that aren't always realistic.
Be careful what you say on social media. It's not going to only hurt you today, it's going to hurt you 20 years down the road.
So, I mean, commenting nice things on your friends' posts, posting things that are realistic and that are not showing this highlight reel of your life, because I think that's unhealthy for the ones posting them and the ones viewing them.
I guess my advice would be do what's in your heart. Just follow what you desire.
Be careful what you put out there, but speak your mind.
It's important to read stuff that you might not agree with, so you understand what's wrong about it.
Just by your very existence, you have a right to pursue your happiness.
Can still enjoy being a woman and the feminine aspects of that. I think it's a great time to be a female because of the opportunities.
My advice would just be to, find yourself and find your purpose and be who you are.
I think you can be a stay-at-home mom and be a feminist. I think you can be an office manager and be a feminist. It's what you think is a feminist and how you can better the cause, because it just comes down to equality, I think.
Now I had one final question. How do you define feminism?
Feminism is having equal choice. I think feminism is having agency over your own destiny and your own body.
Feminists can come from all walks.
The empowerment of all women.
Regardless of how they express themselves, I'm glad that Generation Z is involved.
The power to choose what a woman wants to do in her life.
Feminism is equality for all, no matter their gender, and the equal opportunity for everyone to live their life the way they want to live it.
Supporting opportunities for women and leveling the playing field for all women.
Discovering who I am and not being ashamed of it.
Feminism is choice.
Independent choice, female empowerment, living your life the way you want to live it.
Through these interviews, a discovery emerged. 83% of participants said that they do believe there is a disconnect between generations. However, all participants defined feminism by using the word choice or equality. No answer was divided among generational lines, proving that we are a lot more similar than different. But what does this mean for Generation Z? How will we contribute to this movement?
I feel that sort of the activist reputation that Generation Z has is because they don't have another choice. It's either do something or die. You know, with climate change and the division of people, if you don't do something, if you're not active, if you don't use your voice, you're in trouble. Now we're handing it over to Generation Z, and it's sort of like if they don't make it matter, it's the end.
Born in the midst of 9/11 and finishing school in the middle of a global pandemic, Generation Z is equipped to continue this movement. So where do we go from here?
The right to learning should be given to every child.
Conditions in the factories have often been harsh. Poor safety, illegally long working hours, cramped accommodation, few breaks and little leave.
I was 12 years old when I first got trafficked.
उतनी साल रहेगी तो तुझे कोई पसंद नहीं करेगी। आशा जाओ करते दिएছে তার বাদে বলল যে আমরা আর পড়াবো পড়া বাদ দেও দিলে আর আমার মেয়েকে জ্বালা যন্ত্রণাও করতে লাগে।
I remember laying on the surgical table and my mom watching me, and that was when I really realized that I was going to be mutilated.
She was just 12 years old and one of many children working at the factory.
For the first time ever, women in Saudi Arabia will be able to hit the road as drivers.
Girls were pulled out of school when they hit puberty because they were considered ready for marriage and babies.
It is believed that 59% of these women will have experienced some kind of violence during their life.
To cover the cost of her education so that she could continue to learn, because education is a basic human right.
Rape is not uncommon in India. Government data shows a woman is raped every 20 minutes.
Now,
last month I worked 20 days, but they only paid me for 11, she said. If I question them, they yell at me.
If you don't educate children, means becomes a generation lost.
I decided to speak to a few more women from Gen Z to see what they have to say about the future of feminism.
International feminism is undoubtedly the most important step for the future of feminism.
Our generation has called attention to the marginalization and oppression of communities under the umbrella term women.
Every generation takes on the new struggles and issues of the old generation. I feel like now Generation Z is coming into play.
This means advocating for feminism not just within our own country, but within other countries as well.
It's about ensuring equity across all fronts. That's racial, gender expression, sexual orientation, religion, ethnicity.
These are the issues that we've been given.
We're uniquely situated with the privilege to advocate for women who differ from us. We want to make sure that we aren't forcing westernized culture on cultures that differ very much from ours, but also promote the principles of uplifting women and uplifting feminine qualities to the same respect as men.
On the economic side, the World Bank recently released a report that stated that in countries where women were given equitable opportunity to pursue education or to join the labor force, the country's GDP is sure to increase by almost 3 times.
To get involved with international feminist organizations, UNICEF being a very famous one. And if you cannot donate your money, donate your time.
The biggest hope for us as a generation is that we are connected, and seeing the other side of the story globally because of this connection on social media.
Without a doubt, feminism is for everyone, and women's rights are human rights. Because of this fact, we want to make sure that we're inviting everyone to the conversation.
Women are going to have to speak out and voice and tell their stories across the globe in order for everyone to recognize that women do have rights. And that is the only way that's going to happen is through social media and through all outlets of media, films, books, TV.
The system cannot change if there's no societal pressure to change it. With the rise of social media, it's so much easier to connect with people from different parts of the globe and understand what they're going through, understand their situation.
The fight for equal rights for women is a global fight.
Honestly, Generation Z is going to be defined by the global reach of feminism, where activists in Ecuador can connect virtually with activists in Ethiopia, being able to collaborate, being able to share ideas, and advance the mission of feminism.
We have the passion, the motivation, the fire in our bellies to get up and fix it.
These are the feminist rights we need to fight for. This is the agenda of our new wave of feminism, and it is ours to write.
Welcome to the fifth wave. Welcome to the fifth wave.